All right, there we go. Sorry. First one, air ratchet, also known pneumatic. If you go down to the tool stores, you see there'll be a whole aisle that says pneumatic tools. Pneumatic just means air powered. So this one, if we talk about size of drive, we're talking about the square right here. That is a 3/8 drive air ratchet. You also, another common size is 1/4 inch. Instead of having to sit there with the ratchet and go back and forth, or a wrench, go forward, take it off, go back, down, up, back. I can put this on, I squeeze the trigger, it zips the bolt or nut in and out. I highly recommend break bolts free before you break them with this. Don't use the air power to break bolts free because it's really hard on the internals of this and you'll kill your tool sooner than later. Instead, I break them free, then I zip them off. So pneumatic air ratchet for taking in and out bolts. Number 2 is an air blowgun. Ours in the shop looks a little different than the picture. Same thing. We can use this for many, many different things, whether we're cleaning our shop floor and blowing it out, whether we have to use spark plugs and we want to clean out the spark plug tube. So we take the coil pack off or the ignition wires out, blow the tube out so that debris doesn't fall down in the engine. The only thing we need to remember is we don't blow them at ourselves because we can cause damage to ourselves. Our compressor is at about 120 psi, so we don't want to be blowing air at ourselves. We always want to blow away from us. Or if you're blowing off, say, we talked about the spark plug tubes. If you're blowing out a spark plug tube, put a rag or your hand over it so you're not leaning over it, spray it, and it all blows up in your face. So now you have that dirt and grime in your eyes. So number 2 is air blowgun. Number 3 is a rib joint pliers. A rib joint pliers is a great tool because instead of just having one size to grab one size of bolt, I can open them up and I can make them a lot bigger. So this gives me many different options for the type of size of bolt or whatever I'm trying to hold on to. They're called the rib joint pliers because if you see right here, it has a bunch of ribs. So that's what allows you to open and change the size of them. So 3 rib joint pliers allows us to hold on to multiple different sizes of objects. Number 4 is an Allen wrench. A lot of you probably have seen an Allen wrench before because it seems like any tool set you ever buy, it comes with a bunch of these. A great thing to remember about Allen wrenches, there are sizes. So this one, I don't know if my camera will focus in on it enough. I don't think it will. This is a 5/8 Allen wrench. So there's metric and standard, so you want to make sure you grab the right ones so we don't strip out bolts. I'll talk about it many times during this presentation when we talk about tools and we work forward through this semester. You want to make sure you find the Goldilocks fit of tools. We've all heard that old, is that a fairy tale, I guess you'd call it? Story about Goldilocks. She went in the house, the first chair was too small, second chair was way too big, third chair was a perfect fit. When we do tools, we don't want to have to hammer them into the spot I'm trying to use. I don't also want it, when I put it in, to be way too big. I want that perfect fit. So when you use tools, whether it's an Allen wrench, a socket, a wrench, a socket, wrench, screwdrivers, any of them. You want to find that Goldilocks fit so we don't damage either the bolt, the tool, or yourself. Number 5. Can anybody tell me how many points are on that socket? Go ahead and unmute yourself if you...
12.
12, thank you. That is a 12-point socket. So when we talk about points, what we're going to talk about, and I'm going to show you on wrenches, I have a 12-point. So if we actually counted it, we have 12 points. If you look here, I have 6 points. In our shop at the school, you will not find 12-point sockets. You'll find 6-point sockets. Anybody know why I like 6-point sockets over a 12-point socket?
Because there's 6.
Okay, let's take it one step further.
Less likely
Because
to
6-point socket.
strip.
You can go, John Paul. My bad.
Oh, I was just gonna say it's less likely to strip the bolt.
We are less
round it
likely
off.
to strip the bolt. Very good, John Paul. Thank you. Because the bolts are 6, they're 6 points, just like the bolt. So I'm contacting on all surfaces of this when I put force on it. With 12, I'm only contacting on the points because it's 12. So with a 6-point, I'm contacting the whole bolt. So as I'm putting force on it, I'm making contact all over. Less chance I'm going to round that bolt off. So that's why 6-point sockets are the best to buy. Some sets you'll buy come with 12 and 6. If you buy a big set, like a big Craftsman, if you go over to Ace Hardware and buy a big Craftsman set, they usually come with 12 and 6. I have 6 in my toolbox. We'll talk about, actually, let's talk about now. We'll wait. We'll wait. Let's go down to, so 6-point, 12-point. Trying to get it so it focuses. I'll use my shirt as the background. 12-point. Number 6, is that a deep or shallow socket?
Deep.
No. Deep, thank you. The normal 2 options for sockets are shallow and deep, and we can see the differences between the two. So we have a deep socket and we have a shallow socket. Can anybody tell me if this is a chrome socket or an impact socket?
It's a chrome socket.
This is a chrome socket. So if we see, I have these black sockets. It's hard because everything behind me is black, sorry. Black socket, chrome socket. Black sockets are made out of a much higher quality of metal. They're made to handle the power and impact from air tools. Black sockets can be used with air tools. Chrome sockets can only be with hand tools. If you try to use chrome sockets on impact tools, I guess we should say any impact tool because we have electric ones now too instead of just pneumatic. So if you use this on an electric impact or air impact, all that extra force can actually cause these to pop. So it'll be pressure, and all of a sudden it just goes pop and explodes on you. And it's not always the most fun. Make sure if you're using any type of air tool or electric tool that has extra force besides just a simple hand tool, you have to use an impact socket. If you're using a hand tool, you can use a chrome socket. Impact sockets can also be used with hand tools. On my roll-around cart, when I worked at a shop, I'd have my big toolbox back by the wall, and by the car, I'd have a small roll-around cart with all my daily tools I use, whether it's pliers, a magnet, sockets, ratchets, a mirror, my flashlight. Whatever I use most commonly was on a roll-around cart so I could have it right next to the car. If I had everything in my big toolbox, usually I'd be working on the car about right where I am now. If I needed another tool, I had to turn around, walk back to my toolbox, grab a tool, come back. Now I need another tool, so I had to go back to my toolbox, grab my tool, come back, and it would repeat this process over and over again. Instead of doing that, I have a small roll-around box. It was about a 3-drawer box with a lid so I could put stuff on the top too without it falling off. I'd have it right here next to me. So instead of turning around and walking to the wall every time, I could just reach over and grab tools and speed up my process. So that's why I always use impacts on my roll around. I just had impact sockets because I can use it whether I'm using a hand tool or an impact tool. So instead of having to switch sockets when I switch tools, I could switch from my air ratchet to my hand ratchet without having to switch sockets too. It just speeds up the process. So this can be used on electric or air impact tools and hand tools. chrome can only be used on hand tools. 7. Seven is a flathead screwdriver. Looks like the minus sign. It's for taking in and out slotted screws. So we got flathead screwdriver. Just like all tools, there is different sizes of tools or screwdrivers. This is a 1/4 inch one. So make sure when you use the screwdriver, just like we'll talk about several times, find that Goldilocks fit so you don't either damage the tool and you don't damage the bolt, the screw, whatever you're trying to take out, or yourself. Flathead screwdrivers are not pry bars. They're made of a different metal than screwdrivers, so they can't handle this pry force. They weren't designed for prying. They're designed for loosening and tightening screws. So flathead screwdrivers is not the same thing as a pry bar. Use a pry bar as a pry bar and a flathead screwdriver as a flathead screwdriver. Number 8 is a feeler gauge. Kind of looks like a Chinese fan. So each one of these pieces of metal is 1/1000th of an inch. So it starts at 2/1000ths of an inch. So really, really flimsy. And I think this one goes all the way up to maybe like 20 thousandths. Here's 20. Here's 20 thousandths. If you want to compare a 2/1000th of an inch, so that's 0.002, we'll make it into something that we're a little more familiar with. 1/8 of an inch is 0.125. So that's 0.125 is 1/8 of an inch. This is 2/1000ths of an inch, so 0.002. This allows us to measure a lot of tight tolerances. One of the most examples is on a wheel speed sensor. It's a magnetic sensor that picks up on a reluctant wheel. So it's a geared wheel. As it goes around, the magnet gets stronger reaction, less reaction, stronger reaction, less reaction. The manufacturer will actually say there needs to be 6/1000ths of a gap between the sensor and the reluctant wheel. So I can come here, I can grab my 6/1000th and I can slide it in between. It would be the gap in between to see if I have 6/1000ths to see if that's what's causing my problem. So number 8 is a feeler gauge.
How do you spell that?
Feeler? F-E-E-L-E-R. Wait, I think F-E-E-L-E-R. Feeler. Number 9 is an adjustable wrench. Adjustable wrenches are a great tool for in your vehicle or on the farm or at home where you don't have a lot of tools, but it's not a good professional automotive tool. Anybody know why this might not be a good professional automotive tool?
It could, or the adjustment screw could like slip and it could open up, and also only has 2 contact points.
Yeah, you're on the right track. So he's talking about this thumb screw right here. I can adjust it in and out. And this one's actually nice. It actually has measurements on it. So like you could, my camera doesn't want to pick that up either. It has, so if you had a 1/2 inch bolt, I could get this to 1/2 inch. And now I can put it on my bolt. But you see the problem here, there's a lot of slop in this head because of how the tool works. So I only have those 2 points and a lot of slop in the head. There's a chance that I round off bolts, I slip, I can cause more damage than good with these. The nice thing about them, and why I say they're good for in your vehicle or on the farm, instead of carrying all these wrenches, so I got 32 6mm right here, I can have them all in one tool. So instead of carrying all these wrenches, I can just put this in my pocket, go about my work on a farm or in my back of my car, and I can solve a lot of problems with this. It's nice and convenient that way. In our shop, we have plenty of wrenches. As you see here, the board I'm standing in front of is our metric board. I'll pan over here quick. Will it let me? I got a second board over there. That's our standard board. Between the two boards, I have between 6 and 32 mil over here, and I have over there between like 1/8 and all the way up to like 1 3/4 inches. So I have lots of wrenches in the shop. I have the right size, so let's try to avoid using these and use the right wrench so we don't damage ourselves, damage the bolt, or hurt the tool. There's nothing worse than when you're working on something, you don't use the exact right tool, and then you cause yourself more work by either rounding off a bolt or stripping a head of a screw because you didn't use the right size. Creates more work because now we had to drill it out and get that out. So use the right tool. We have the right size wrenches up here. Let's make sure we grab the right size wrench. Number 10 is a ball peen hammer. Peen is P-E-E-N. They're a very nice hammer to use for a lot of different things. One of my favorite things to do with them is it has this nice round point, the ball part of the hammer. Some people use it for metal work. There's a lot of different applications for this hammer, but I like to use it to get axles out. The axle shaft or half shaft usually has a little divot in the end of the snout. You put that in there, have another hammer, you can drive that axle out without damaging anything. So ball peen hammers are a nice hammer to use, but we have to be careful because it has a steel head. I gotta be careful what I hit with it. Since it's a steel head, I can damage whatever I hit with it. So I want to be careful and pay attention to what I'm swinging at. A lot of times I take off rotors using my ball peen hammer, but I had to pay attention to if I'm going to be replacing the rotor or if I'm reusing the rotor. If I'm reusing that rotor, I had to be careful where I swing so I don't damage the rotor. Just like if I'm trying to get a tie rod out of the knuckle. So the tie rod comes up through the knuckle and it's a cone shape. So as you tighten the bolt up here, it sucks this in and they get stuck. So when you take them out, you sometimes have to tap on this a little to get it to drop down. If I just hit on the end of that bolt on the top of the ball joint of that tie rod end, I'll mushroom it and I'll damage the threads because steel on steel. So I have to be careful where I hit, what I hit with it, because I can cause damage. 11 is a tubing or line wrench. So I got a tubing or line wrench. Does this look like a 6-point socket or a 12-point socket? I'm sorry, say that again.
I didn't say anything.
Oh, I thought somebody said something. 6
No,
point.
I was gonna say kind of looks like a 5-point, but I might be wrong. My phone's kind of low right now.
So the two options are 6 or 12.
6.
So it kind of looks like our 6-point sockets. And I see where you get the 5. See our 6 points? So the nice thing about tubing or line wrenches is it kind of in between a wrench and a 6-point socket. So with a wrench, we really make contact in 2 points. There's a better chance that if we had to use this open end of the wrench, when I put pressure on it, I can slip or I can round off a bolt. So they made these tubing wrenches so I can have 5 points of contact. And this slit right here is for us to get over to that line. We usually use these on brake lines because the brake line comes into the back of the caliper and screws in there and goes all the way up to master. So I can't get a socket over it or the 6-point end of this combination wrench because the line's in the way. So they made this little slot in it so I can put it over the line. I slide it down the bolt. I can get as much contact as possible with that, whether it's the jam nut or a brake line bolt. There's a lot of different bolts we'll use these on. Most common is that brake line going in the caliper. But I can slide it over. I have a lot of contact with that nut, less chance of stripping it out or rounding off that bolt. So tube inner line wrench looks like 6 point with just a little slot cut into it. That's where George got the said there's 5 points instead of 6. But the other thing is on this one, we notice that it has what looks like 2 of the same tool. Manufacturers are really smart. Instead of putting 2 of the exact same tool on here, because I don't need 2 of the same ones, I have a 17 at one end, and I have a 15 mil at the other end. So I have 2 tools in one, because why would I need the 15 on both ends when they would do the same thing? Unlike a combination wrench has the same size on both ends because they have 2 different functions. So manufacturers, if they have the same function, will put 2 different sizes on it. If they have the same function, if they have the same function, it's 2 different sizes. If it's different functions, it'll be the same size because these are both 17 mil. So tube and line wrench, a lot of times we'll buy them, just like it doesn't look like we have many here, but each one of them is 2 actual tools. Well, is that short or deep? Johnny, is that short or deep on number 12? Let's see who else is here. Lance, is that short or deep?
I'm guessing short.
Yeah. And then who can answer if that's an impact socket or a chrome socket?
Impact socket.
That is an impact socket. So those are short sockets right here, and we can compare them to our deep sockets. I started on that thought a minute ago, and then I got distracted. But it used to be common that we only had short and deep sockets. But just like with all tools, as people buy more tools and more vehicles come out and more jobs need to get done, manufacturers keep modifying tools to try to make it just a hair better so when people buy more tools again. Because tools, if you treat your tools right, this should be about a one-time investment. I shouldn't have had to buy this set of sockets over and over again. I shouldn't have had to buy this set of sockets over again. I shouldn't have had to buy a ball-peen hammer over and over again. I should buy it, take care of it, and should last. So manufacturers of tools learn that, hey, if I make tools that are just a hair different and do the job better, technicians will buy more. So instead of just being shallow and deep, now there's like extra long, semi-deep, extra low. They just keep adjusting how long and deep they are. It also depends on the manufacturer too, because some manufacturers make their deep sockets deeper. Some have thicker walls. There's a lot of science and stuff that goes into making sockets, and that's one of the reasons they cost different. There's a huge difference between like a Craftsman socket and a Snap-on socket. I don't know if any of you have really looked up tools, but tools aren't cheap. Even low home use tools are not cheap. They add up quickly. But there's a big difference between a home use tool and a professional grade tool. So at home tool would be like your Huskies, your Craftsmans, GP. I'm trying to think. Everybody kind of has their own brand, but those are the types that you'd find at like Ace or over at O'Reilly's or at Home Depot or at Fleet Farm. Those are at home use tools. If you've been driving around, you might see big trucks that have signs on the side of them. Around this area, I've seen Mac and I've also seen Snap-on, but there's also Cornwell and Matco are the 4 big professional tool manufacturers in our country. But the big difference between a Snap-on socket that might be, $10 to $15 a socket, or a Craftsman socket that's maybe $3 a socket, is the type of metal they use, their tolerances for how accurate the bolt size is. So this one's a 9 mil or 19 mil. It might be a hair bigger, might be a hair small because of their plus or minus tolerances when they manufacture this. Snap-on, Cornwell, Matco all have really tight tolerances. They don't, if it says 8 mil, pretty much on Snap-on, it's an 8 mil. If you go by Craftsman, sometimes 8 mils are a hair big and they like to round off bolts. That's the big difference between the price, is how accurate their machining is, the quality of metal, and also the warranty. So a little bit of information about that. We'll talk more about that as we go. But number 13 is one of my favorite tools. It's one of those tools you have in your toolbox that you don't use often, but when you do use it, it saves your tail. So this is an impact driver. What an impact driver does is I put a bit on the end here. It has a 3/8 drive here, so I have an adapter to put either like a Torx bit in it or a Phillips bit or a flathead bit. I put it in my screw. I take my ball peen hammer and I give it a good whack. As I hit it with my ball peen hammer, I'm forcing the impact driver in to the screw so I don't strip it, and at the same time, it's forcing it loose. So every time I hit it, it's forcing it in and it's rotating it loose. It's a great way to break free stuck screws that don't want to come loose. One of the biggest areas I would use it is on brake jobs. If you ever taken a tire off and see that little screw that's holding the rotor to the wheel bearing or the hub, it's just a set screw to hold that rotor on when it goes down the assembly line. But because it might not, the rotor might get put on one stage up at the assembly line, and then maybe the caliper is 10 steps down their way, and then the tire gets put on. They don't just want that caliper or the rotor hanging there, so they put the set screw in there to hold it. But now that set screw's been in there for, you know, maybe 30,000, 60,000 miles, it might get stuck. So if you try just using, you know, with a Phillips and I try to use my Phillips screwdriver, I might slip out and strip it. Now I have to drill it out. Instead, I can take my impact driver, put it in there, give it a good whack. It usually breaks it free about first hit, and now I don't strip out that bolt. So it's a really nice tool. It's one of those tools in your toolbox that you don't use often, but when you do use it, it saves your tail. 14 is a pneumatic impact gun. Remember, pneumatic means air. They also make electric impact guns now. If you go look at Milwaukee, DeWalt, Makita, Snap-on has one, Matco has one. They all have electric impacts now instead of using air power, but we have air-powered impact guns. This one's a 1/2 inch. So when I say 1/2 inch, I'm talking about the size drive right here. They also come in different sizes. They can get, for normal automotive, it can be a 1/4 inch, 3/8, or a 1/2 inch. If you go up heavy duty and go work for Caterpillar or International, you know, big diesels, you might have 1 inch or 1.5 inches. But bigger the tool, the bigger a job it does. In automotive, the biggest we use is a 1/2 inch, and we use that for, you know, like tires or engine mounts, big bolts. I wouldn't use it on little 10 mil bolts because I'll snap the bolt with that. It's way too much power. This has, our new one, I think, has about 600 foot-pounds of torque loosening and like 450 tightening-ish. So that's plenty to break a small bolt. So bigger the tool, bigger the job. 15 is an extension. Extensions comes in all different sizes drives. When I talk about drives, I'm talking about what size square this is at the end, what size of socket it sits on. So this is a 1/2 inch extension. 1/2 inch means that it's a 1/2 inch square right here. It goes with my 1/2 inch sockets. So here I have 1/2 inch sockets, 3/8 sockets, 1/4 inch sockets. And it's all depending on this drive, that square on the backside. Extensions just allow me to reach in the tighter spaces. So I'd either put my ratchet here, if this, or my breaker bar. If this was a pneumatic one, we have pneumatic extensions just like this. I could put it on my impact gun, but it allows me to reach into tighter spaces. On this end, I'd put my socket. This end, I'd put some type of handle. and then I can loosen bolts that I can't normally get to. 16 is a ratchet. Ratchets allow us to tighten and loosen bolts. It's our handle for loosening. I got 3 different sizes. The common sizes in a shop are my 1/4. The middle one's my 3/8. And my left hand side one is a 1/2 inch. As we see, bigger the tool, bigger the job. 1/2 inch tools are a lot bigger than 1/4 inch tools. 1/4 inch tools are meant for little jobs. 1/2 inch tools are meant for bigger jobs. The longer and further I am away from where the socket is, the more force I have it. Think about back to physics class when you learned about fulcrums and levers. Same things with the ratchets. We're using them as a lever. So the further away I can get from that pivot point, the more force I'm putting into it, the easier time I have breaking something free. 17 is a pry bar. Like I said before, pry bars are not the same thing as flathead screwdrivers. We can see that they're made of a way different metal. They're made to take that abuse of prying. These are designed to be pried on. So they come in all different shapes and sizes. My suggestion is when you use a pry bar, use as big as one that's necessary for that job. If I was trying to get, say, a ball joint out, or I was trying to pull down the lower control arm to get an axle out, I wouldn't use the short one because I don't have much mechanical advantage. I'd grab my big 4-foot pry bar because I'm way over here. And when I push down, excuse me, I have a lot more force. My force is a lot more multiplied. So pry bar. 18 is a combination plier. This is a plier that you probably have seen because a lot of home kits come with these. Combination plier allows us to grab onto pretty much anything and everything we want. Allows us to hold on to stuff. Sometimes if I'm having to heat something up, I might hold it with this so I don't have to touch what's hot. I might hold a lot of different things, but it's called combination because I can open and close the jaws in 2 positions, either fully closed or somewhat open, and allows me to hold on to different things. The combination pliers. 19 is a Phillips screwdriver. Phillips is the one that looks like a plus sign. So it's the one that's a plus. Just like all other tools, Phillips have different sizes. This one's way worn. So you want to make sure when you put it in that it has the right size grip, so you don't strip out that bolt. A lot of tool companies do really nice things. If you see here, this one has a red stripe. This one just is white and blue. So Craftsman has color-coded their screwdrivers. So when I look in my toolbox, I can quickly know what one's a flathead screwdriver and I know what one's a Phillips screwdriver. Tool manufacturers do a lot of little things like that to help you grab your tools faster, because the faster you can grab your tools, the more money you can make. You don't want to spend all your time searching for tools because you're wasting time, you're not making money. That's why tool organization is really important. If you talk to students from last year, I made this board over summer. I made the 2 boards over summer. Last year we had a bunch of toolboxes. Tools were not as well organized, and we spent time finding tools. That's not why we want to look for education. We want to learn and not look for tools. And when you're in the shop, time is money. So if you're spending your whole day trying to find sockets and tools, you're not fixing cars, you're not making money. So tool organization is really important. At a shop, you wouldn't have a tool board like this. You'd have your box, a nice box that locks. But this works really well for education. Remember about toolboxes. Toolboxes don't make you money. Tools make you money. Toolboxes hold your tools. You need to have a good toolbox so you can lock it up at night so your tools don't walk off. But starting off, you don't have to buy a huge, $100,000 toolbox from Snap-on that's bigger than a house. We've all seen them on Instagram or social media, those huge toolboxes that have stairs and all that. You can start something simple and work your way up. I started with a roll-around cart that was about this big, this high, 3 drawers and a lid. And I worked up to where I have a single bay box, I have a roll-around box, and I have another roll-around box. So I have one at home with home tools, and I have my automotive tools. So start somewhere and work your way up, just like with tools. My first tool set I bought was not Snap-on. It wasn't the highest end because I couldn't afford it at the time. I bought Craftsman. I bought a set of Craftsman, and I bought a roll-around cart, and I spent about $1,000 to get all the socket wrenches, screwdrivers, pliers, the roll-around box that I needed so I could start working. I started with a $1,000 investment, and since then I've spent a lot more money on tools. But as I grew as a technician, I kept buying tools. The way I knew I needed to buy another tool was I would go and ask if I didn't have a tool, if I had to borrow it from the tech next to me, that was okay. But if I had to go back and borrow that tool again from that tech next to me because I needed it a second time, now it's on the list of tools I needed to buy. So on my toolbox, I just kept a piece of paper and I would write down, hey, I need to buy this tool. I need to buy this tool. And then I'd look at the different options of where to buy it, compare, warranties and price and how good it was. And then I kept improving my tools and growing my tool set. Just like I said, now I have basically 3 boxes, not huge boxes, but I had 3 boxes because between doing projects at home and working on cars and that, I've had to grow my tool collection. Some of you might not have tools at home. Maybe you don't come from a background that works a lot with their hands. I'm the same way. I grew up in a household that we didn't have many tools. My parents are not the handy type. But since then, I graduated high school and worked my way up through order. I have expanded my tool collection because I enjoy working with my hands and fixing things. So start where you can afford and keep growing from there. Number 20 is the needle nose pliers. Needle noses come in all different shapes, sizes. You can get ones that are like 1.5 feet long with a bent tip at the end, some are round. It all depends on what you're trying to do, but it allows us to reach in the tight spaces. If you're a fisher, if you like going fishing, you probably have one of these in your tackle box too to take hooks out of the mouth of fish because they reach into small spaces really nicely. Same with automotive. Gives us a really nice chance to grab stuff. Some of them even come with a wire cutter. If you see right here by my finger, this also has a wire cutter. So allows us to reach in the tight spaces. 21 is a dead blow hammer. So I don't know if my mic picks up that, but as I shake it, I can hear it rattle. Inside this, it's filled with BBs. So as I take and I swing, instead of just having the power of my force, now I also have the momentum of those BBs in there. So as I hit, I get more bang for my buck. What might be the benefit of this dead blow hammer over this ball peen hammer?
It doesn't bounce back and hit you.
So we might not have as much rebound. If you've seen blacksmith and that, steel has rebound, so we might have bounce. It depends what we hit. Because if I hit, say I hit the rubber of a tire, it's filled with air, they're both going to bounce back and hit me. So if you hit steel, I can see that. But what do we know is about the material of the heads?
It won't damage the screws.
It won't damage what I'm hitting. It's out of rubber or plastic, so when I hit metal with it, this is softer than when I'm hitting, so I won't damage what I'm hitting. So it's a really nice hammer to have. Back in the day, a lot of techs would have rubber mallets instead of dead blow hammers, but dead blows have really taken over the field. I use it for a lot of different things for hitting, but it has extra force to it, and it's made out of rubber or plastic, so I don't damage whatever I'm hitting. Rubber mallets, I just kind of think of camping. Seems like everybody has a rubber mallet in the camping gear that put stakes in without being loud. 22 is a scraper. We have a few different types of scrapers. The one in the image shows ones with razor blades. I also have plastic ones. It depends what we're trying to scrape off, whether it's a silicone gasket or a paper gasket. We might switch what type of scraper we use. You want to make sure when you use a scraper that you go away from your hand. If I'm scraping, I wouldn't want to do this because even this plastic one, if I slip and get my hand, it doesn't feel good. If I'm using one with a razor blade and I slip, I'm going to put that razor blade in my hand and there's a chance I got to go get stitches. So always keep your hand away and scrape away from your hand. 23 is a diagonal cutting pliers. I got my diagonal cutting pliers. It allows me to cut whether wires or zip ties, maybe sometimes small plastic. It just allows me to cut. 24. is a snap ring pliers. These can be internal or external snap ring pliers. It depends if we had to make that snap ring bigger to take it off or smaller to take it off. I can switch the screws from side to side to change it, whether if I start open and squeeze it closed or if I start close and squeeze open. It all depends what type of snap ring I'm going to take off, but snap ring pliers are for taking off snap rings. You'll find those mostly in like transmission, some engine work, more internal stuff. 25 is smart spark plug gapper. If you've been to AutoZone or O'Reilly's, you've probably seen these because they're up by the register usually because it's a quick $1 add-on for them to try to upsell you. It allows us to start and measure the gap of a spark plug, or we can also gap the spark plug. So we can change how much space is in between the center electrode and the ground. So we can start here with 20 thousandths, and if you see as I go around, it gets thicker. So I put this spark plug on here. I rotate it around till I get it, snug. I'm not going to force it, but just where it stops. I can read how much gap it has, and then I can compare it to manufacturer specs. It allows me to open them. So if I need to open it a little, I can just pry a little. And we're working with thousandths of inch, so it only takes a little. Or if it's too big, I just take it and tap it gently on something that's hard. But the spark plug gapper allows me to check the gap of a spark plug and also to gap that spark plug. .26 is a cooling system pressure tester. So this allows me to hook up to the cooling system of a car. Just like a bicycle pump, I can pump up the system and pressurize it. So instead of having to go drive a car around, use the heat of the engine to expand that fluid, because heat and pressure are directly correlated. To pressurize that system, I have to heat up that fluid. Now I have a hot system. I can't open it because we can't open cooling systems when it's hot. So instead, I can take my cooling system pressure tester, hook it onto the cap of the reservoir or on the radiator, depends on the vehicle, and I can pump it up the spec to try to find leaks. So it allows me to find leaks. It allows me to pressurize the system. Say if I'm trying to bleed it, there's a few different things, but it allows me to pressurize the cooling system without having to get the system really hot. 27 is a compression tester. Compression tester is a really nice diagnostic equipment that allows me to check kind of how each cylinder of an engine's working. I take out the spark plugs, screw this in, I'll disable the fuel, I'll open the throttle all the way, and I'll crank it over about 5 times and see how much compression that cylinder is making. If I have a misfire, so the engine's not running right, I'll maybe check spark plugs, I'll check wires, and then I might jump to a compression test, because if I go down the cylinders and one's way different than the rest, I might find why on the right path to why my car is misfiring. So compression tester allows me to check the compression of cylinders. We talked about these a couple times. 28 is a combination wrench. It has the box end on one end, the open end on the other. Because it's 2 different functions, it's the same size. So this is a 16 mil. So on this side, it has 16 mil. This side it has a 16 mil. When we talked about sockets, I told you I only own and I only out here have 6-point sockets. Why might I have 12-point wrenches when I said that we like 6-point so much? Anyone have thoughts on why for wrenches we might want a 12-point?
It's easier to kind of readjust on that bolt.
Yes. Perfect explanation. So, because I have 12 points, I have twice as many spots I can put my wrench. So if I'm trying to get in tight space on a bolt and I have a 6-point, I might not be able to get on it because of the angle of the bolt and how it's sitting. So if I have a 12-point, it gives me more options to get in there. With a socket, if it didn't want to line up, I can just rotate my socket a little and make it work. Wrenches, I can't do that. They have a long area they take up, so I can only get into certain areas. So a 12-point allows me to get into different areas. If I can get into it and loosen it with a 6-point, I'm going to, so I don't accidentally round it off. But 12-point gets me twice as many options to get on that nut or bolt. 29 is a locking pliers. They also come in all different shapes and sizes. But what a locking plier does is I can set how open and closed the jaws are. And when I squeeze down, and let me open these so I don't crush my fingers. When I close down, see how it stays closed? It's locked into place. And then I can push the release and open them. So it allows me to basically have an extra hand. It allows me to hook on and hold on to something without having to worry about it falling off. If I did the same thing with the combination plier and then let go, it would just fall. A nice trick with these is we all maybe seen a hood of a car that the struts are no longer good, so the hood falls down instead of stays up. You can take these, put a rag around it so we don't damage that strut rod and clamp it on there, and now the hood will stay up. So allows us to lock onto something and hold on. .30 is a Torx socket. Torx is T-O-R-X. Torx. Torx are the one that looks like a star. You can have Torx sockets. You can have Torx drivers that are like a screwdriver with a Torx bit at the end. They're becoming more and more popular. Manufacturers try to keep the average Joe, the average consumer, from tampering with stuff. So they keep changing the types of bolts in that to make sure, try to keep customers from touching it. So Torx are becoming more and more popular. It's the star-looking bit. 31 is a torque wrench. As you see here, I have a few different types of torque wrenches. I have my 1/2 inch, and I have my 3/8. We have 3 types that are click types. So I'll set it to my torque spec. And I'll push down and it'll click when I get to that specification. So torque wrenches allow me to set it to my specification for how tight the bolt has to be, and it will tell me when I get to that spec. It will not stop me at that spec. It only tells me this torque wrench will let me keep going until I break the bolt. So I have to be careful to pay attention to that click, because I can keep going until it breaks. So torque wrenches allow me to tighten bolts to a specified amount. .32 is a brake lining thickness gauge. What I can do is I can take this to my brake pads without taking all my whole, or shoes, depends. You can't always get access to the shoes. But the brake pads, usually there's a little hole somewhere in the caliper, or the space between the caliper and the bracket. Slide this in and see how thick my brake pads are. As we see, this one is 2 millimeters. This one's 12 millimeters. We're looking at the thickness right here in between. So if it's green, it's good. If it's yellow, I need to pay attention and maybe replace it soon. Red means it needs attention now. Just like a stoplight. Stoplight, green means go. Yellow means slow down, prepare to stop. Red means stop, we need to replace now. So they made a nice little gauge so I can quickly tell the customer the condition of the brakes. Anytime you take tires off a car, you need to check brakes. Anytime. Doesn't matter if you're just doing a rotate and they're not there for brakes. You're the last professional that worked on the car. Make sure you're checking brakes. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about brakes and tires. But I'll say it many times. Anytime you take tires off car, checking brakes. 33 is a serpentine belt tool. You can find many different styles of this. This is one of the nicer kits you can buy. It allows us to, whatever the tensioner there is on the car, I have a lot of different options, whether it's a square drive, if I need to use a crowfoot or sockets. I can put it on many different angles. This one also ratchets, so it gives me more opportunities, but this is the tool we'll use to take a serpentine belt off. The serpentine belt tool takes off the serpentine belt. .34 is a scan tool. They come in all different shapes and sizes. They can range anywhere from 20 bucks up to 15 grand. Depends on what capabilities you want. Depends on what you're going to do, what cars you're going to do. That affects the price. So this one, it was about, I think, 50 bucks. It'll read most normal day cars. It doesn't really, I don't think, do exotic cars, but it'll do, you know, import, domestic, basic check engine lights. It has an OBD2 connector. So the government stepped up and said, hey, every manufacturer has to allow customers to know information about how their car is running. So if you look underneath the steering wheel area on the driver's side of the car, you'll find a connector that looks like this. This plugs right in there, and I can read codes. I can read some sensors to do diagnostic work. So scan tool allows me to read the computer information of cars. .35 is the tire thickness depth gauge. Oh, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Tire tread depth gauge. I had my wrong T word. Tire tread depth gauge. So what this does is I put it all the way out. I go to my tire. I push down. And then where this silver reads on the line is how much tread I have left on my tire. So it's a nice, easy way to go around. I can measure treads. I'll measure in 3 different places. And then I can tell the tire customer where they're at with their tire life. 36, how many point socket that is that?
6.
6. Is that a chrome or impact socket?
Chrome.
Chrome. So what type of tools can we use that with?
Hand tools.
Hand tools only. If we use it with any pneumatic, whether it's electric or if any impact tools, we can't use it with impact tools, whether it's electric or pneumatic. If we do that, there's a chance it explodes and pops, and it could hurt yourself or hurt others, or and plus you broke your tool. I only had one socket pop on me once. I wasn't even using with an air tool. I borrowed a socket from a buddy. They do an oil change quick, and I started pushing on it to loosen a bolt, and it went pop on me. So it wasn't even with air tools. It was just the pressure on it caused it to pop. .37 is a universal joint. So universal joint has 2 swivel points. So it allows me to get into tight areas that I can't get straight on with my socket or my socket and extension. This allows me to get in at different angles. Normally they don't hold in place like this, but usually when you set it like this, they kind of flop around. So I highly suggest you take a little bit of electrical tape and loosely wrap electrical tape around the 2 joints. Because that way when you put it at a different angle, it will hold there and it's easier to get on the bolt. So universal joint allows us to get into tight spaces that we can't get straight on with just a socket and an extension. 38 is a spark tester. We're not testing spark plugs with this. We are testing if the engine has spark or not. So we can set by screwing in the screw. We can change the gap. I plug this into the ignition wire. I ground this out somewhere. I crank over the engine, and I would actually watch the spark jump through there. So it's a way to tell if the engine has spark or not. It's a spark tester. 39 is a tire inflator. So this is actually a really nice setup. Instead of having to have a little air chuck and a tire pressure gauge, it's all in one. So right here it has a little glass window. So when I press this onto the tire valve stem and I don't press in the button, it'll actually tell me right here the pressure of the tire. When I squeeze down, it'll fill it with air. I can let up and check it again so I can quickly fill tires with air. So that's tire inflator. And the last one is a torque stick, and torque is T-O-R-Q-U-E. T-O-R-Q-U-E. So I have two torque sticks right here. The white one is 100 or 140 foot-pounds. The green one is 65 foot-pounds. So what this allows me to do is I can put this on in between my impact gun. I put this on and I put my socket on, and now I can quickly put tires back on cars and not have to worry about over tightening them. So this will stop at 140 foot-pounds. It will stop the impact. Impacts want to hammer. So they do this, hammer, hammer, hammer. This absorbs the hammer, so this will actually ratchet and stop it at 140. That's why if we notice, and it's kind of hard to see on the camera, this one's a lot thinner than this one. This is 65, this is 140. The thinner is, the lower the foot-pounds. I don't fully trust these. I use them as a gauge, so I use them to put the tires back on the car so I don't over torque them or I don't accidentally break the lugs. But when I get done, I set my calibrated torque wrench to the spec, and I hand torque them all down again to make sure they're torqued to spec. You'll hear me say it several times through the semester. One of the fastest ways, besides being dishonest to customers to get fired, is to leave tires loose. Having a customer have a tire fall off a car is pretty much bye-bye. I don't think I've ever seen anybody survive a tire falling off a customer car when the customer's driving down the road. Pretty much it's all bye-bye, and it might be more than one person going bye-bye. So that's why I start with my impact gun and my torque sticks to get close so I don't over torque them, and then I torque them down by hand to make sure I tighten all tires. So torque stick. Any questions or any that I missed or any that you missed?